we're going to turn it back over to Robert. He's put together some information about the Mark Twain Zephyr. And then at the end, we'll have a final opportunity to take your questions. So Robert?
Okay, thanks a lot, Greg. And we are going to give everybody a brief history of the Mark Twain Zephyr. By 1935, the original Burlington Zephyr, later renamed the Pioneer Zephyr, had successfully raised patronage to overflow levels on its Kansas City to Lincoln, Nebraska route. Expectations were high that the Twin Cities Zephyrs would do the same for the highly competitive, revenue-challenged route between Chicago and the Twin Cities. The Mark Twain Zephyr II was specifically designed in hopes that it would be successful on a third route, a 442-mile round trip from St. Louis, Missouri to Burlington, Iowa. The Mark Twain Zephyr's route between St. Louis, Missouri and Burlington, Iowa would take it through Hannibal, Missouri, the historic and romantic river town which was the home of the author Samuel Clemens, the immortal Mark Twain. The tracks over which the streamliner would run literally follow the levees of the Mississippi River where Clemens' career as a riverboat pilot started. The Burlington's advertising department took full advantage of the year-long 1935 centennial celebration of Clemens' birth and chose Mark Twain Zephyr as the train's name. Appropriately, the cars of the train would bear the name of Twain's best-known characters, Injun Joe, Becky Thatcher, Huckleberry Finn, and Tom Sawyer, becoming the first Zephyr to have the names applied to each unit. Built at the Edward G. Budd Manufacturing Plant in Philadelphia in partnership with Electromotive Corporation, the newest Zephyr's 4 units would also be mounted on only 5 trucks. By articulating the 280-foot-long train, 3 trucks and 34 wheels were eliminated from what a conventional train with a steam locomotive and 3 cars would have, affecting a considerable savings in weight. Articulation also eliminated slack action by having the front part of the car and the rear of the preceding one rest upon the same truck, held together by a sleeve joint, allowing it to round curves efficiently, yet unifying the whole train. The lead unit, containing the power plant, a 30-foot railroad post office, and a 15-foot mail storage area, used a cleverly selected homonym for the word engine and was named Injun Joe. Almost identical to the power unit of the 9900, it varied only by inches in its dimensions and incorporated the cosmetic changes and operating improvements already in place on the Twin Zephyrs. The train was propelled by a 660 horsepower, 8-cylinder, 2-cycle Whitten 201A diesel engine designed by General Motors and built by Electromotive Corporation. It ran on ordinary fuel oil and operated with no spark plugs or ignition system, combustion being accomplished solely through high compression. The engine directly powered a General Electric GT534 main generator, which provided current to 2 GE Model 716 traction motors mounted on a lead truck, which had 36-inch wheels for traction. All of the other trucks only had 30-inch wheels. The gear ratio of the power truck was 52 to 25 for a rated maximum speed of 117 miles per hour. On board the lead unit, the Zephyr could carry 600 gallons of diesel fuel, 80 gallons of lubricating oil, 140 gallons of engine cooling water, and 12 cubic feet of sand. Loaded with 92 passengers, the whole train weighed 287,245 pounds, which is considerably less than 2 ordinary heavyweight coaches. And here is a look at the engine. Again, that's the Whitten 201A diesel engine designed by General Motors and built by Electromotive. And there's another look there at Injun Joe. The second unit, which you see now here on your screen, was a 64-foot baggage and express car named Becky Thatcher. The third unit is named Huckleberry Finn and held the kitchen and pantry in the fore section, with a service counter separating it from a dinette comprised of 16 seats grouped in foursomes facing tables that were set up at mealtime and removed afterwards. Here's a look at the interior of Huckleberry Finn. 20 additional chairs put the capacity for this car at 36 passengers. And the final unit was named Tom Sawyer, number 572. And here's a look at the rear of the Tom Sawyer. The car had coach seats for 40 passengers in the fore section, while the aft contained a solarium, which you're looking at here in both photos on the left and right hand of your screen. It was a parlor lounge with detached chairs for another 16 passengers. Upon completion, the Mark Twain Zephyr went on a brief tour of the eastern United States, including Ithaca, New York, where this newspaper article you see on your screen was taken from. A few weeks later, it was sent to Nebraska, where speed trials were conducted between McCook and Oxford. A new speed record of 122 miles an hour was set over 3 miles of newly constructed right-of-way, built to the highest of standards. From there, the Mark Twain Zephyr returned to Hannibal to be christened on October 25, 1935. The honor of christening the new Mark Twain Zephyr fell to Nina Grabelowicz. She was the granddaughter of Samuel Clemens and, of course, great-granddaughter of John M. Clemens, a key partner in the creation of the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad in 1846. Speeches were given by governors of Missouri and Iowa, followed by remarks by Burlington President Ralph Budd, who you see in the photo with Nina. He's, of course, on the left side of the photo. Budd commented that actual service would begin the following Sunday, October 27, 1935, with the train appropriately departing Hannibal for St. Louis, where on Monday, October 25, 1935, it would begin its daily round trip of 442 miles. 11 cities along the Mark Twain Zephyr's route participated in a competition on that day, each sending 3 children dressed to represent Mark Twain's 3 most famous characters, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and Becky Thatcher. The Mark Twain Zephyr was well received by patrons, and passenger traffic increased remarkably on its home route between St. Louis, Missouri, and Burlington, Iowa. For most of its 23 years in operation, the train set was used on this line. However, it was also occasionally served as a fill-in train on other CB&Q routes as well. This included between Chicago and Denver in 1936, ahead of the Denver Zephyrs going into service. For about 2 weeks also in 1936 between Chicago and the Twin Cities, plus later for various months and periods between St. Louis and Kansas City, and also between Galesburg and St. Joseph, Missouri. And here's one of the later shots of the Mark Twain Zephyr. The Mark Twain Zephyr saw its last revenue runs in May of 1958. Here's a little history for you post CB&Q. In 1960, the train set was sold to a resident of Glenwood, Iowa named Frank Dashner. He planned to refurbish the train set and sell it to Cuba, of all places. Unfortunately, the Cuban Revolution put a quick stop to those plans after Dashner was unable to sell it to Cuba by way of neither Canada nor Mexico. He decided it would make the perfect restaurant and motel. Unfortunately, Dashner died at the age of 51 before final payments could be made to the railroad. His estate ended up selling the train set to Ernie A. Hayes of Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Ernie was interested in the train, thinking it would spur tourism to the area after Mount Pleasant was bypassed to the north by Interstate 80. Ernie ended up donating the Mark Twain Zephyr to the Old Threshers Museum in Mount Pleasant. Unfortunately, Old Threshers only had a narrow gauge track at the time and was never able to come up with the funds or really the interest among its members to build a standard gauge track during the Mark Twain Zephyr's tenure there, leaving it sit idle for 17 years. At first, the train received a lot of love from the community, including Boy Scouts who would build a model train in one of the cars. However, throughout the 1970s, the train was a frequent target of vandalism, receiving broken windows, seats, and much damage. After it became clear the train would never run at Old Threshers, the Mark Twain Zephyr was sold off to Alex Barkett, a Kansas City businessman, in 1979. Barkett had purchased more than 24 Zephyr cars during the 1970s, selling most of them off to Saudi Arabia, where they actually remain today. Here is a newspaper article you see on the left-hand side of your screen announcing that Barkett was purchasing the Settlers train. Over on the right-hand side is a picture of a crane that was used in 1979 to lift the train up and out of Mount Pleasant and for it to be on its way to Kansas City. And this is a shot of the siding that the Mark Twain Zephyr sat on between 1979 and 1987. Barkett died just a year after buying the Mark Twain Zephyr in 1980, before anything really could be done with the train. For the next 7 years, it sat on this industrial siding that you see here in Kansas City. In 1987, the Mark Twain Zephyr was purchased by Ronald Lorenzini and his two business partners from the Chicago area. They were full of ambition and ready to turn the Mark Twain Zephyr into a dinner or casino train, or even perhaps a stationary museum and dining experience in the Chicago suburbs. However, the group either did not find the time or money to complete any substantial restoration. The train was kept near Joliet from 1987 to 1997. Minooka, Illinois from 1997 to 2008, and down near St. Louis on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River from 2008 until 2020, when it was purchased by the Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad. The 5 cars were moved between southern Illinois and northwest Wisconsin between July 31st, 2020 and September 4th, 2020 by flatbed semi-truck, done one at a time. This careful work was performed by Over-the-Top Construction, based in Ohio. And yes, now the real work begins as we begin restoration. If you enjoyed this very quick version of history, we did want to mention, coming soon, for the past year or so, we've been working on a 400-page plus history book about the Mark Twain Zephyr. So if you enjoyed some of the stories, then you'll want to purchase a copy of this book. Again, has over 400 pages and written by our team of historians, including John Kelly, David Lotz, myself, and my wife, Candace Tabern. We hope to have this book in the next couple of months. We are putting some finishing touches on it, and once it's complete, we will be selling copies at marktwainzephyr.com. Again, marktwainzephyr.com. Look for this book coming soon in the next couple of months. So that is the brief history of the Mark Twain Zephyr. And I'm Robert Tabern. I'm going to throw it back to Greg, who is going to tell you a little bit more about our restoration plans.
Okay. One of the big parts of our acquisition of the Mark Twain Zephyr was figuring out the mechanical part of it, figuring out how we were going to go about rebuilding the train. And the real secret to the whole thing was the acquisition of what will be the new engine, generator, and such of the train. We started out kind of looking at the development of the Zephyrs through time, and the transition from the original Winton engines to the final Zephyrs that were built with the EMD 567, and thought that the natural evolution was to the 567. And of course, now that the 567 has a 75-year proven track record, we couldn't think of a better thing to do. We have a fleet of SW1 locomotives, so we're very familiar with the 6-cylinder 567, which will fit into the Zephyr. And I believe that if the Burlington would have rebuilt the Mark Twain Zephyr rather than retire it in the late 50s, that's what they would have done with it, because it was such incredible proven technology. And so what we wanted to do, rather than take an early model 6-cylinder from an SW1, we wanted to get one of the very last versions of the 567, which was the C block. But there were very, very few of those 567 6-cylinder C blocks built, most notably in the SW600, which was a downsized version of the popular SW900. And so we started looking around the country trying to locate one of those. And I got very fortunate back in 2019, in late summer of 2019, while speaking to our friends over at Independent Locomotive about some other locomotive parts. And I just kind of happened to ask them that day, you know, if they ever ran across a 567C 6-cylinder. And they said, geez, you know, that those things are so rare, they probably hadn't seen one in their lifetime. And he said, we just took in a SW600. I'm like, oh my God, it's the perfect thing that we're looking for. I said, would you sell it? And he said, well, you know, we'd consider selling it. And so we went over the very next day, looked the locomotive over, and, you know, basically it will allow us all of the things that we need to repower the Zephyr. We'll take the engine, the generator, the air compressor, the control stand, and even at this point, possibly one of the trucks to replace the power truck on the Zephyr. And then we have another truck that we can use with our SW1 fleet. And then eventually we will use the body, and is why we painted it in Chicago Northwestern colors last year. We'll use the body as a display piece on the railroad. So every part of the locomotive is going to be reused. Some parts to maintain our current locomotive fleet, parts to power the Zephyr, and then have a nice display piece to have here on the railroad. And I think, Robert, did you have the slides of the various pieces in the train that show? Yeah, here we go. The restoration plans. We'll kind of go through each car in the train and what our plan is. And you can kind of see on the left-hand side of the screen at the bottom, you see what the original floor plan was in the Engine Joe. And then in the middle, you see the new floor plan. And we're going to, because of the type of service that we offer, and because it didn't make a lot of sense from an accessibility standpoint to rebuild the RPO section in it, because it was not accessible from the rest of the train as originally built. We felt that we could utilize the space as a theater rather than to put back that RPO section that basically nobody would be able to look at. So we're going to use part of that RPO section behind the main engine compartment first to house our 480 volt head-end power generator. The train will be rebuilt with all modern electrical, air conditioning, electric heat. And so then immediately behind that head-end power generator, we're going to put a double wall for sound deadening, and then some seating for a theater. And the purpose of the theater, while the train is in motion at the station before and after the trip, will be to take some of the great newsreel footage of the original Zephyrs from the late 30s. And so we'll just have a continuous loop of that running, you know, probably with a little bit of, you know, vintage music, and that'll just play on a continuous loop. So guests during the trip, after the trip, can just walk up there, sit down for a few minutes, and see those great old newsreels of the Zephyr actually in action. And then the next car in the train was the Becky Thatcher baggage car. And so we're going to redesign the interior of that, basically keeping as much of the Zephyr interior, the Zephyr colors, the Zephyr flavor that we can, but utilizing the wall space and building a display wall down the middle of the car to utilize the Becky Thatcher as a museum. Basically, it's all going to be space to display our collection. And I've been collecting Zephyr memorabilia for the last 5 or 6 years, and tell the story of the development of the Zephyr fleet, and specifically the Mark Twain Zephyr. And again, this will be something that guests will be able to walk through the train during a trip, before, after the trip, and really find out the history of the great Zephyr fleet. The next car in the train is the extra car from the Pioneer Zephyr. And I don't know if many of you know, but when the Pioneer Zephyr was originally built, it was originally built as a 3-car train, and then a 4th car was added in 1938, and that's car 500 here. And it had a small buffet or small dinette kitchen and seating area originally. Now that car has been basically completely stripped out. And so we were trying to figure out, because we have the Huckleberry Finn with that same kitchen dining type setup, how could we utilize it? And so for that purpose, we went through, and I always have loved spending time looking at passenger car floor plans. I've got a lot of books, and I love looking at the designs of the interiors of passenger cars. And so we looked at the 1936 Denver Zephyr cars, and we're going to adapt the floor plan for the Tabern from that Denver Zephyr into the body of that dinette coach from the Pioneer Zephyr. That Pioneer Zephyr car, when the Pioneer Zephyr was donated to the museum in Chicago, they did not have the space for the extra car, the 4th car that was added in 1938. So that car languished at West Burlington and was eventually lumped in with the Mark Twain Zephyr and sold off with the Mark Twain Zephyr set. And it has continued to stay with the set. It's interesting, back in the early 60s, they tried to sell the car. There was actually an ad in Trains magazine at the time where they tried to sell the car, but with only 1 truck, and it being a part of an articulated train set, there was really no takers for it. So it has always just stayed with the Mark Twain Zephyr. So basically, for better than 2/3 of its life, it's been with the Mark Twain Zephyr rather than the original Pioneer Zephyr. So you can kind of see, and I know it's very small in that center portion, but on the right hand side of that drawing, you see there's a quarter-shaped round bar, and then some booth seating, some freestanding chairs. And so the tavern area there will have seating capacity for 40 people, and then plus restrooms in the car. Now the next car in the recreated train will be the Huckleberry Finn, which was the original dinette of the Mark Twain Zephyr train set. It had coach seats in most of it, and coach seats with tables for the dinette portion. And it had a kitchen that had a hallway, and then you can kind of see that in the diagram at the left there. Because that was up against the baggage car, no passengers ever had to pass through that area. But in our newly designed Mark Twain layout, we want our passengers to be able to get up and move around the train. We want them to be able to go to enjoy the Becky Thatcher museum car, go up to the theater should they choose. And so we're going to, again, borrow the floor plan from the kitchen of the 1936 Denver Zephyr and allow for a hallway around the kitchen. So we'll have a full dining, essentially a full dining car in that Huckleberry Finn, with a kitchen and a passageway around the kitchen, so our guests can move about the train as they're going along. And kind of important to note, most of the interior was stripped over the past 60 years by the successive owners. You know, and that's one thing. If you read a lot about it on the web, you'll see lots of comments through the years about how the train was tunneled, how the train, you know, was stripped out. You know, it's only a shell, it's not worth restoring, all that. But we looked at it, you know, differently. Having rebuilt so many cars over the years, my wife and I, we walk onto the Zephyr when we were looking at it for the past 10 years, and we could see the opportunity, and it was kind of like, well, good. A lot of the hard work's done. You know, somebody else took the time to rip out all that old insulation and get rid of you know, the decay that was there. And so we're just basically getting a tube to start with, and we can build it back into something fantastic. The last car is the Tom Sawyer, and you'll see on the drawing at the left, you'll see originally lounge seating in the back, and in the front half of the car you see all coach seating. It was very a while back, I watched on YouTube a video of some trips that the Illinois Railroad Museum ran with the Nebraska Zephyr, and it was very instructive to me, and just kind of backed up what I've long known, being in the business nearly 4 decades now, that people really love first class accommodations. They always sell out first, and people reluctantly buy coach tickets. Sometimes they don't even bother to reluctantly buy them because they can't get first class seats. And so we decided that that there really wasn't a great benefit to putting a coach section back in, because it's not what our passengers are looking for. So we decided again to borrow some more concepts from that 1936 Denver Zephyr, and to put a swivel parlor section on the train. So coming from the head end, you'll have the theater, you have the museum, you have the great tavern lounge area, you'll have the full dining car, and then you're going to have parlor, and then finally the rear end observation lounge. Total first class seating on the train, you know, seating for 120 people. And I think this is really going to give people an opportunity to experience it. What we're trying to do is to utilize the Zephyr color palette, the stainless steel, the Art Deco styling, and give it every bit of that Zephyr feel that we possibly can. You know, this is not a historic restoration of this train. This is an adaptive reuse of the train, but I think this is really going to be something special that people are going to want to come and see. And I guess with that, I think we've kind of reached the end of that section, and now we'd like to entertain questions.